Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. BC billionaire Jim Pattison is facing backlash for a proposed sale between a company he owns and the U.S. department that runs ICE. The BC Green Party leader is calling for a boycott of Pattison's businesses. We're asking for your reaction. How should Pattison and his businesses handle this controversy? Plus, a spike in overdose calls and new substances entering the unregulated drug supply. That warning coming from the BC Centre for Disease Control. They'll join us after 12:30 and we'll take your calls. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. First to our top story. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is in talks to buy a Virginia warehouse that's owned by the property arm of BC billionaire Jim Pattison, and with stated plans to turn it into an immigration and customs enforcement, that is ICE, processing facility. ICE has been under fire for its mass immigration crackdown in the U.S., recently leading to 2 fatal shootings by ICE officers in Minneapolis. CBC has reached out to the Pattison Group. We have not heard a response. We're taking your calls this half hour, asking you, what do you make of this potential sale of a Pattison-owned warehouse to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security? Should Jim Pattison face criticism? And how should he and his business handle this controversy? You can call us now. Just dial 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me first is CBC reporter Yasmine Ghania. Yasmine, thanks for being with us. First, tell us how we learned about this potential deal.
So, Michelle, we learned about this because the U.S. Department of Homeland Security sent a letter to Hanover County, Virginia officials, because this is where the warehouse is located. And so they shared their intent to buy this huge warehouse and turn it into an ICE processing facility. They say that ICE could possibly make adjustments to both the exterior and interior of this warehouse, including building processing and holding cells and a guard shack. This is a huge warehouse. It's about 550,000 square foot. And Jim Pattison Developments bought the site in 2022 for about 7.6 million US dollars, but it could be valued at around 50 million US dollars if sold after these improvements.
So since this has become public and we've learned about it, what has been the reaction?
There's been lots of reaction. So Emily Lowan, leader of the BC Green Party, who I believe will be on the show later, is calling for a boycott and for Jim Pattison to sever ties with ICE. BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma was also asked about this potential deal, and she says she's very concerned about what's happening south of the border. Here's more from her.
Just like the rest of the world, we watch in horror about what's happening there. And I think that calls upon business leaders across this province, including the whole country, to think about their role in what is unfolding there and to make decisions that would not lead to some of the outcomes that we're seeing unfold in the States.
I also spoke to a Hanover County resident, Michael Berdan. He is a lawyer and an immigration advocate who strongly opposes the idea of having an ICE facility in his community. And he says many of his neighbors feel the same way for a variety of different reasons. Here's more from him.
From the concerns about ICE enforcement and human rights abuses that are happening and being publicized, to the effect on local property values, certainly. Folks don't want to live next to a pseudo prison of sorts.
We reached out to Hanover County officials, but they have not commented. They have not taken a stance on this potential deal, but they will be, they're expected to discuss the matter tomorrow.
Now, Yasmine, there are other businesses that have come under similar scrutiny for dealings with ICE. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so for example, as reported by the Globe and Mail, Vancouver tech company Hootsuite secured a contract with ICE in the fall that involves monitoring social media discussions about ICE. ICE has also earmarked millions of dollars for a bulk order of about 20 armored vehicles from Brampton, Ontario-based defense manufacturer Rochelle. We spoke to an ethics associate professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, Chris McDonald. He says that even though that Canadian companies have in the past done business with ICE, right now it can be seen as being problematic because of Donald Trump's widespread immigration crackdown. And so he says that companies need to take a strong stance and draw a clear line about who they do business with, or else they risk tanking public opinion and staff morale. Here's more from him.
When it comes to human rights violations and when it comes to activities that seem to be eroding the rule of law, I think at some point companies need to sort of draw a line and say, look, we don't want to be contributing to that.
And as you said, Michelle, we've reached out to a Jim Pattison group and Jim Pattison Developments several times, but we have not yet heard back.
Okay, certainly a story we'll continue to pursue. Yasmine, thank you. As CBC reporter Yasmine Ghania. And we are taking your calls, asking you, what do you make of a Pattison-owned property business potentially selling a Virginia warehouse for use by ICE? Should Jim Pattison and his businesses face criticism for this? And how should these businesses handle the controversy? You can call us now, 604-669-3733 or 1-800-825-5950. Again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Emily Lowan joins me now, the leader of the BC Green Party, and she's calling for a boycott of Pattison-owned companies, which include grocery stores, car dealerships, and resorts. Emily Lowan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Tell me more about what you are calling for and why.
Yeah, so I'm calling for a boycott of all Pattison companies, including grocery stores like Save On Foods, Quality Foods, as well as his car dealerships and media companies. I think we've all been truly horrified by the recent weeks of public executions of innocent Americans at the hands of ICE. This is truly a history-defining moment for businesses to draw the line, for people to stand up against fascism and take every action they can to support their neighbors and stop this senseless violence. Jim Pattison, if this deal goes through, would make about a $40 million profit if he sells his massive warehouse to ICE. And I think it's time to get those elbows up, Canada, and use our consumer pressure to have Pattison cancel his deal with ICE. It's very clear in recent days that ICE is reliant on corporate support from their vehicles being produced in Brampton, Ontario, from the software that they use from Hootsuite in Vancouver, and now this Pattison warehouse. This is a very tangible action that could delay the construction of this ICE facility. And I think everyone is just trying to buy time here. A delay of weeks could truly save lives and would be an important win for the anti-ICE movement.
What impact do you really think it would achieve, a boycott of Pattison's companies?
Yeah, I think it's put in an important spotlight on Pattison and is forcing, him and this industry to pick a path, really. And I think it's very important for businesses to live up to their supposed values and to stand up on the side of working people and not fascist administrations. And so, as I said, this is an incredibly tangible action at a critical window. This deal is currently in the works, and it could delay the construction of this ICE facility and save lives in the process.
My guest is Emily Lowan, leader of the BC Green Party, as you heard, calling for a boycott of Pattison-owned companies, which include grocery stores, car dealerships, and resorts. And this is in light of a potential deal, a potential sale of a warehouse owned by the property arm of Jim Pattison's businesses. and this would be a sale to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for use by ICE. So we're asking you, what do you make of this potential sale, and how should Jim Pattison's business handle this controversy? Again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Let's take some calls right now. Lauren is joining us from Gabriola Island. Hi, Lauren. What do you think of this potential sale?
I totally support Emily and this call for these three companies or any others. And I get half my groceries at Nestor's, owned by Pattison, and so I think there's a potential to make it cost more than he gets back, and also the long-term impact, because I can easily reduce. It's 50% now. I can easily reduce it to zero, and I would feel good about that. And the other companies, Hootsuite and the vehicle company in Brampton.
Yes, it
would be very easy and very possibly highly effective, because Pattison owns a lot of things, but there's also always alternatives. So I think it's a very good, focused action.
Lauren, thank you very much for the call from Gabriola. Okay. Take care. Tom is up next in North Vancouver. How do you feel about this, Tom?
I feel terrible about it. I was describing to your intake person that I am a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada. I don't even recognize my own country right now. My sister lives in Virginia. She does not live in the county where this might be located. But I know, as a member of the Democratic National Committee and the committee chairman of her county, she would be livid to hear about this. I will call her and tell her, by the way. I personally think that Jim Pattison has an ethics moment here where he, knowing what ICE is doing in the United States, knowing how heavily funded it is by the U.S. government, he has a choice right now about whether he supports that fascist movement, for lack of a better descriptor, by selling to them, or choosing something else. He can just channel Nancy Reagan, as far as I'm concerned, and just say no. He does not need to sell this facility, although it's a lot of money, and I cannot advise him on his business, but I know that he's got enough money that he could do something different. As far as what this means to the rest of us here in Canada, sure, we can do boycotts. We can let our feelings be known to Jim Pattison. I drive Toyotas. I can stop taking them for service there. There's other things the rest of us can do. But at some point, a business has to either stand behind their ethics or say we don't have any and carry on as usual. But this is not a usual time in the world. So I think it's time for him to take a stand and just not sell to this organization.
Tom, thank you very much for the call from North Vancouver.
Thank you.
Another caller here. Take care, Tom. Kate is up next, also in North Van. Hi, Kate. What are your thoughts on this potential sale? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I really echo what Tom said. We've got Jimmy Pattison here. He's made millions and millions and millions of dollars already. He's in his late 90s. How much money is enough money? This is a real chance for him to actually stand on the side of morality in this sale and refuse to do any business that would benefit from the brutalities that are happening in the States. Siding with the moral conscience of Canadians would be something that would actually rally people to say, hey, I want to go and shop at a Jimmy Pattison store or buy a car from a Jimmy Pattison lot, rather than say, hey, do I really want to spend money with somebody who's colluding with such brutality? It's not the Canadian thing to do.
Kate, thank you from North Vancouver. Let me go back to the leader of the BC Greens, Emily Lowan, who was calling for this boycott. Emily, as we mentioned, and you mentioned it as well, another BC company, in fact, has potential dealings with ICE. Vancouver-based Hootsuite reportedly has secured a pilot project with ICE. This was reported by the Globe and Mail. So are you calling for a boycott or criticism of Hootsuite or of Rochelle as well, which is the company in Ontario?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an issue that we need to addressed from all sides right now. This is a crucial window, and so yeah, I also support the Hootsuite boycott. But I think crucially we're seeing so much traction around the Pattison boycott because there is a greater consumer face there, and we've seen about 3 million views on my boycott action post so far. It's gaining real traction, and I expect to hear a response from Jim Pattison very soon. There's an outpouring of anger and reaction from his loyal consumers. And it's important to point out that Jim Pattison personally called 500 people when there was a small boycott action when he hired former Premier Glenn Clark in 2024. So I think this is a much more reputationally damaging issue for the Pattison group, and he should start making calls, or his executives should, and take a stand on the side of ethics and humanity here.
We are awaiting a response, have not had a response as well from Jim Pattison or the Jim Pattison Group. On Hootsuite, I just want to read to you a quote from the current CEO of Hootsuite, Irina Novoselsky, and this is as reported by the Globe and Mail from an internal call last week. And she's standing by that contract with ICE. And the quote in the Globe and Mail is, quote, "We do business with a lot of polarizing nonprofits and other organizations. And as long as these enterprises follow our terms of service, that's our line." End quote. And so what do you make of that argument? We've been hearing a lot about the, business and ethics and the line between them. How much should they be considering political or social issues in making their business decisions?
Well, I think, that's Hootsuite's line. They've drawn their line in the sand, and now I think it's up to consumers to make their decision about, how they feel about using their services. And it's very clear that, this boycott is also gaining traction, and I expect to be at the rally in Vancouver on Friday at the Hootsuite headquarters, because, we're not living through normal times. We can't survive with business as usual. Companies, forces like ICE rely on corporate support. And, it's very clear that, companies need to take a clear look into their moral conscience right now.
Let's go back to our callers. Warren is up next in Richmond, and we are asking you, in light of a potential sale of a warehouse in Virginia to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for use by ICE. They say they would use it as a processing facility, and this is a warehouse that is owned by a Pattison company. And Jim Pattison facing public backlash and a call now for a boycott of Jim Pattison's companies from the leader of the BC Greens. So we've been asking you how you feel about this, what are your thoughts, and how should Jim Pattison's businesses handle this controversy? And Warren is up next to comment in Richmond. Hi, Warren, welcome.
Yeah. Hi. Just to say at first that I'm not a member of the Green Party, and I've never even voted for the Green Party, but they're bang on this one. And I've put a couple of posts on X advocating for people joining a boycott of Jim Pattison group of companies, because really it's getting down to a choice between democracy and fascism. And if we don't stand up against fascism, then we lose democracy. And I think Jim Pattison should consider this very carefully, because I don't think the boycott will just fizzle out. I think it'll grow and grow and grow until he makes it a firm decision not to sell it to Homeland Security and therefore to be used by ICE.
Warren, thank you for calling in. Craig is next in Delta. What are your thoughts on this, Craig?
I'm actually kind of upset. I'm 50-50 on it. In the sense of being like a corporation, I know that he's got a business to run, and he's got to do what he needs to do. But on the other side, the last two shootings that have happened by innocent civilians, you need to seriously sit down with your moral compass and say, do I want to be on the right side of history, or do I want to allow that history that we know was wrong in the 40s and 30s with the Nazis in Germany and what they did to continue in modern times? I'm not supporting of it. I'm against it wholeheartedly. I think America needs to, as a whole, needs to sit down with itself and say, you know what, this is wrong. This is not right. Canada, as an ally, needs to start putting pressure on that and say, you know what, you're breaking every human right within your country. You used to be a country of freedom. You're no longer that country. You're the country of fear. What happened?
Craig, thank you. Thank you for the call from Delta. Roger in West Vancouver, your thoughts on this call for a boycott and the potential sale?
Well, I think it's rather silly boycotting Jimmy Pattison, who's a private businessman who's breaking no law. The ICE agents in the U.S. are doing what the U.S. electorate elected them to do, which is to oust the illegal immigrants that are in the country. They're doing that. If we in Canada had a similar policy, a similar motion to put illegals out of this country, we'd be further ahead. So it's kind of, I don't understand why the CBC is stirring up the emotions of its viewers to attack a private businessman when this is a country that's not involved in this United States democratic policy.
Roger, thank you very much for your call from West Vancouver. So let me go back to Emily Lowan then, who is calling for the, and this is why we're covering it, is because the leader of the BC Greens is calling for a boycott. So what role really should Canadians be playing here?
Yeah, I do think, you know, we need to be really sharp and aware of our ties to the US administration right now, to Trump's actions and crimes against humanity and innocent American civilians. And on the question of profits, let's be clear that Jim Pattison makes more in his sleep than one of his workers makes in a year. You know, he doubled his net worth from 5 to 10 billion during the first year of COVID by price gouging us all on groceries.
Emily, I'm just going to jump in here. My apologies. I'll let you continue in a moment. But just to note that our TV audience is going to go to a break. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes. But do continue, Emily. My apologies.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, as a country, as we saw with the Elbows Up movement, we need to come together again and show solidarity with our neighbors across borders and do everything in our power as consumers and as citizens to ensure that, you know, we see real that we get ourselves on track towards a path of peace and justice.
Let's take one last caller here, and George is on the line from Kelowna now. Hi, George. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I personally am as opposed to everything Trump and his administration and his lackeys do in the U.S. But this particular cause is a complete storm in a teacup. Like, we're dealing with a simple real estate transaction. An empty warehouse is being sold. It makes no difference to our ethical compass who the purchaser and who the vendor is. I am appalled that the Green Party has nothing better to talk about than to talk about the sale of an empty warehouse in Virginia. This is completely blown out of proportion. So, and I'm a little appalled that you folks at CBC take this seriously and make a whole half-hour feature out of this. I mean, this is an empty warehouse. Who cares who buys it?
George, thank you very much for the call. And according to, I'll just go back to our reporting here when it comes to that property. This was a letter to officials in Hanover County, Virginia. The Department of Homeland Security shared its intent to purchase, occupy, and rehabilitate the roughly 550,000 square foot warehouse property, which has been owned by Jim Pattison Developments since 2022. And the letter says, I'll continue with the letter now. It's stated, as part of the undertaking, ICE may conduct exterior and interior modifications to the existing warehouse facility, including the construction of holding and processing spaces. So that is the reporting as to how what is on the table here when it comes to that proposed sale. Thank you very much for the call from Kelowna. And Emily Lowan, I guess your response to that, blown out of proportion is what our caller said.
So I think we need to look at the numbers here. BC billionaire Jim Pattison is about to make a $40 million profit on ice by, that's blood money, folks. We need to be clear about our ethics here. He doesn't need to process this transaction, and ICE can look elsewhere. But this boycott is setting an example for other companies, other business people to draw the line. And I think there are material human impacts here, because if this boycott triggers a delay on the construction of and refurbishment of this facility, we could be saving lives. And, I think it's just incredibly important that Canadians step up and show real solidarity with our American neighbors that are being shot down in the streets right now.
Let me jump off of what our last caller said and just to ask you, he's saying he does not agree with Donald Trump's policies, but that it is one sale of one property, and again, he said that you and your party are blowing it out of proportion. Is it helpful, do you think, is it contributing to the public debate when you call for a boycott?
Yeah, I think this is often how boycotts start, with one example, with a small community drawing the line, and we've seen this grow over the weekend. I found out last week that this sale was happening, and then put out a post after hearing the news about Alex Crabtree, and broke the news across Canada. And so, we've seen now, upwards of 3 million views on this action, and increasingly, I think Canadians are just drawing the line on doing business with companies that are complicit with the Trump administration and with ICE. And I think we do need to have a bit of a wake-up call and remember Trump's threats to annex Canada and make us the 51st state. If we don't stand up for humanity and our American neighbors right now, who knows what's going to happen? This is a time to band together and to cut off ties with businesses that are complicit.
Emily Lowan, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
That's BC Green Party leader Emily Lowan joining us from Victoria. It is 12:33 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Thanks so much for joining us. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to take your calls. I will be joined by the BC Centre for Disease Control, who has issued a public warning about an increase in overdose and drug poisonings, and also saying that there's a novel drug that has made it into the unregulated drug supply. So we'll hear more about that and take your calls on that too. How should communities react? That's coming up after this CBC News update. And here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon, and we have some breaking news. A person is in critical condition after a shooting involving the U.S. Border Patrol near the Mexico border with Arizona. Is all the details we have at this time. We will have more when more details are available. Surrey police say 2 foreign nationals are facing charges after shots were allegedly fired in the city early yesterday. There are no reports of property damage or injuries. Shortly after the shots, officers stopped a vehicle in the area and found a loaded handgun. Surrey Council has passed a motion urging the federal government to declare the string of extortions in that city a federal emergency. Mayor Brenda Locke also wants Ottawa to appoint an extortion commissioner and deploy more RCMP federal organized crime units. She also wants Ottawa to expedite the removal of non-citizens charged or convicted of extortion. And the public hearing into the death of Miles Gray has been postponed for 4 weeks. Gray died in 2015 after being beaten by 7 Vancouver police officers. The hearing was thrown into uncertainty last week after a lawyer in the case uttered an obscenity that was caught on an audio stream. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Periods of rain this afternoon with a high of 9. Highs around -4 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, mainly cloudy with a high of -3. Highs around 0 with some sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 0 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly cloudy this afternoon with highs around 9. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. A lot of emails coming in on our previous topic on the potential sale of a Pattison-owned warehouse in Virginia to become possibly an ICE facility. Emails here coming from Kathy, who writes, the Jimmy Pattison Developments website states integrity, respect, quality. I can't see how the deal with ICE works with their objectives. Scott on Quadra Island writes, I think the real question should be, who will a boycott of the Pattison Group really hurt? The billionaire himself or all the individuals and families that work for those companies? Of course, lobbying Jim Pattison to withdraw from this deal makes sense. Lisa writes, I think the Pattison Group should stand up for Canada and human rights and show that he is Canadian and for Canadians. They have $1 billion. They don't need the money. I will stop shopping at Save-On, which is my only known dealings with Pattison. Meredith in Prince George writes, as soon as I heard about this potential deal, I sent a message to the Pattison Group and also passed information on to friends and family. My husband and I, as well as those I reached out to, are all boycotting Pattison companies. I'm grateful this is being discussed today, and I hope Mr. Pattison backs out of discussions and negotiations. And Michael in Nelson writes, Hootsuite, Rochelle, and Pattison are all responsible for ethical practices, just as BC Forest companies cutting old growth should be also. One of the difficulties of running a business is always the ethical concerns of the effects of their relationships. Making a simple choice is not easy, yet they have to be on the right side of ethical issues. Thank you for all your emails that you've sent. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. It's 12:37 now. Thanks for joining us here on BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Well, on January 21st, BC Emergency Health Services responded to a record number of overdose calls, 256 in one day. That is a new single-day record. The BC Centre for Disease Control has issued a public warning about that increase, and they say it's linked to a novel substance, a sedative called medetomidine, that has entered the unregulated drug supply. So we're taking your calls to the BCCDC. What are your questions about this spike in overdoses? And how should BC communities respond to this latest development in the overdose crisis? You can call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on TikTok. My guest is Dr. Alexis Crabtree, a public health physician and the medical lead for harm reduction and substance use services at the BC Centre for Disease Control. Dr. Crabtree, thanks very much for being with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
How concerning is that latest spike, the one-day record on January 21st?
We're concerned not just about the one-day spike, but about the larger pattern that we're seeing. Increasing 911 calls for drug poisoning through the fall, culminating in this new total in January this month. At the same time as we're seeing this increase in medetomidine detection. So medetomidine is a sedative that's mixed in with the opioid or fentanyl supply. And we're quite concerned that there is the real potential for health harms for people who are using this unknowingly.
Okay. And so what can you tell us about medetomidine?
Medetomidine is a sedative medication. It's most commonly used in veterinary medicine as a sedative for animals, but it's closely related to a substance that's used in human medicine in intensive care units, again, to provide sedation. It has a number of effects on the body, and you can think of it as slowing bodily processes down. So it causes a decrease in heart rate, it causes changes to blood pressure, and it causes a person to be sleepy or have lower levels of consciousness. When mixed in with opioids, which is where we're seeing it in BC,
right.
There's a risk that it makes any drug poisoning or overdose more complex, so harder for a person to respond to. And it also comes with risks even if there isn't a drug poisoning. There's a risk of that sedation leading to health harms like exposure to cold if a person does not know that what they're experiencing because of the sedation. or there's risks if a person takes it regularly, even if they don't know they're taking it regularly, and then suddenly stops. There's a risk of a very serious withdrawal syndrome with nausea, vomiting, headache, high heart rate, and other harms that may require hospitalization.
Okay, and so it's more complicated. How effective is something like naloxone in these cases?
Naloxone should still always be given if an opioid poisoning is suspected, but it won't work on medetomidine. So what it will do is reverse any problems with breathing that are caused by opioids. And when we have a drug poisoning that's a mixture of opioids and medetomidine, what we see is that there's problems with breathing caused by the opioids, and there's problems with sedation that are caused by medetomidine. The opioids might be reversed by naloxone and the person's breathing will be restored, but they don't wake up. But it's the breathing that we're so worried about. And so naloxone should always be given and is safe to give even in one of these mixed poisonings.
Okay.
It's also vitally important to give breaths while you wait for naloxone to work. It doesn't work right away and brain damage can occur within minutes.
Wow. I'm wondering where you place this latest development in the overall overdose crisis. The public health emergency was declared in 2016. So what does this latest development tell us about how we're doing?
This is another shift in the drug supply, and we've seen similar shifts before. I will say I've been very encouraged to see in recent months, as I'm sure many listeners are, that the BC Coroner Service is reporting that those lower levels of drug poisonings continue with October 2025 is the latest data. So we saw a decline from 2023 peak. That's been maintained so far, and so that is reassuring. But this new change can cause both acute problems and long-term problems for people. We saw a shift in 2020 to having benzodiazepines mixed in with the opioids and fentanyl. And that's caused problems not just with drug poisoning, but with people getting on to opioid agonist therapy or other medical treatments for opioid use disorder, for addiction. It makes it harder to transition to one of those medical therapies. And we worry that the same could happen with medetomidine as well as it becomes established in the drug supply here.
Do we know how it even has made it into that unregulated drug supply?
We don't have full information, and I certainly don't. I'm not with law enforcement. But what we can say is that we've seen increasingly over time that when we look at a fentanyl sample, it's not just fentanyl anymore. It's very common that other substances are mixed in as well. Sometimes these are referred to as cocktails, as mixtures. This probably is done for some of the effects that it gives. It might extend the experience of fentanyl, prevent some of the withdrawal symptoms that people have because fentanyl is such a short-acting medication, or otherwise give some feelings and experiences that people would like to have. Medetomidine is different than some of the previous ones that have been in the drug supply and has some specific harms, but the general move towards more complexity in the drug supply is something that we've been seeing for the last number of years.
There have been developments, not just in the crisis, but in BC's policies, right? So at the end of the month, the decriminalization pilot will end and it will not be renewed, will not be continued by the province. What impact, if any, do you think that might have?
Well, it's an excellent question. What we're seeing is that medetomidine is becoming a very common adulterant in the drug supply across North America, in other cities and provinces in Canada and in places in the United States as well, which suggests that this change that we're seeing now through the fall and into January of this year isn't specifically due to decriminalization. I think we do hope that, similar to the hopes that we had for decriminalization and the hopes we continue to have as it ends, that people will look at this opportunity, look at this as a time to think about changes in their relationship to substances, and whether there's an opportunity there for them to connect in with the healthcare system if they're looking for supports to stop using substances from the unregulated supply.
And do you see, part of the concern has been a lack of those kinds of supports, of detox services on demand, of treatment facilities and beds? I mean, do you see an increase in that
I would defer to the government to talk about the larger picture of some of the services that they're working to put in place, but I can speak to people's experiences of it, and I know it's been concerns raised from community for some time about their experiences of needing treatment when they need it, and being able to access those services right away. And I agree that that's so vitally important that people can access those services, whether it's detox or other recovery services, when they're ready. I have seen people in the healthcare system working really hard to make those services available to people and to make navigating them easier. And I hope to continue to see that, because people really do deserve the very best treatment when they're ready to make those changes.
My guest is Dr. Alexis Crabtree, a public health physician and the medical lead for harm reduction and substance use services at the BC Centre for Disease Control. And the Centre for Disease Control has issued a public warning province-wide with regard to a rise in drug poisonings and the rise as well of the presence of a drug called methamphetamine in the unregulated drug supply. And so it's making response more challenging. So we're taking your calls. Do you have any questions about the current drug supply, and how do you think BC communities should respond to this latest development and evolution in the drug supply? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. That's 604-669-3733. And you can just hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. We are taking your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. That's bctoday@cbc.ca, and your TikTok comments as well. We're watching that if you're joining us there. And so, Dr. Crabtree, and there is also parallel to this the Safe Supply program, right? That the BC government has put in place as well. How far is that going in terms of making a dent in substance use, in problematic substance use and harmful substance use?
Well, I will say, as there's public numbers come out about the prescribed alternatives program in BC, it appears to serve a pretty small number of people compared to the number of people that use substances across the province of BC. We've also seen some increasing restrictions that have been put in place on prescribed alternatives meant to address some of the concerns about diversion, and that has decreased the number further of people accessing this program. So I don't think we can expect that the prescribed alternatives program is a solution to something like this, a large-scale change in the drug supply, to have a new adulterant in it. But it is serving a group of people, and I think there is evidence to show that for those group of people, there is benefit, particularly as the province has adjusted that program to make it safer for the community at large.
Let's take a call here as we ask you if you have any questions about methamphetamine and its presence in the unregulated drug supply. Again, this is a powerful sedative that's used generally by veterinarians, but it has been increasingly present in drug samples. And as well, there has been an increase in drug poisoning statistics as well from the BC Emergency Health Services. So we're taking your calls. How should BC communities respond to this, as the doctor just described it, a large-scale change in the drug supply? And what questions do you have? What do you want to know? 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. And Aaron is joining us from Mission. Hi, Aaron. And I understand you work for Fraser Health?
Yeah, I actually work for Fraser Health. We're contracted. I work for a Mountainside Harm Reduction Society. But yeah, I'm an FTIR technician.
And what is that? Pardon me? What is an FTIR technician?
I do drug checking. So it's a Fourier transform infrared spectrometer. It uses infrared light to essentially tease apart the drugs, and we can tell you the main active ingredient and the main cuts and buffs. And we also send samples of concern for further confirmatory testing, where we're seeing actual methamphetamine come in. There's a lot of different different places you can go to get your drugs checked, which I suggest everyone does because there's ample drug checking sites in BC that do what we do. And medetomidine is of serious concern because we can see the fentanyl most of the time. We can see the spikes. We know what to look for. Medetomidine is so potent, and FTIR can really only see about 5% or more of something that's active. Medetomidine is potent at about 1-2%. So it's invisible to us most of the time unless we send the substance to like a paper spray testing, which is a more advanced type of testing. It's not portable. And so we get a lot of samples and we send about 20 to 30 confirmatory tests a week of down samples to paper spray at substance in Victoria. And that's where we're seeing these medetomidine amounts. And it's very concerning because when we see medetomidine in the down, it's usually from like an overdose or causing serious sedation. And what's happening is the gangs and the cartels who are making this are scaling down the fentanyl and scaling up the medetomidine because it provides this intense sedation, and it makes overdoses extremely hard to reverse, and it also really tanks blood pressure. So it's very hard for us as drug checkers to see this because there is test strips for medetomidine. We did a pilot. It was actually quite successful. They haven't been given to us en masse yet, but they did show a lot of success, and we can strip it now, we think. But yeah, it's causing a lot of issues. And also there's, benzodiazepines in the supply as well, right?
Right.
So you have this triple sort of addiction, poly-addiction going on where people are dependent on opiates, they're dependent on benzos, and they're dependent on a drug they don't even know they're taking unless we talk to them. And that's this medetomidine. And it's related to clonidine as well. So a lot of people will know what clonidine is. It suppresses blood pressure, right? And that's what medetomidine does, too. It's a A2 adriatic receptor agonist, and it suppresses your blood pressure.
So, Aaron, you have just such a wealth of knowledge on this, and you deal with it on the front lines.
Yes.
What do you think should be the response then?
Okay, well, I mean, there's a few things that I believe need to happen. Our publicly funded detox centers, I don't think they are treating the severity of the withdrawal of medetomidine in a way that is strong enough. You essentially need medetomidine to detox off of medetomidine. If you just throw something like clonidine, which would have I think medetomidine is about 7 times the receptor, it activates about 7 times more of the receptors than clonidine, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about 200 times stronger than xylazine if injected. So we're not quite there yet when it comes to detox, right? And this causes people to drop out at a higher rate. That's the number one thing. And number two thing is we have this problem because we do not have a regulated supply. If we had a regulated supply, we would take the power out of the drug dealers' hands and we would put the power back into the people's hands. They would know what they're taking and they'd be able to essentially detox off of this. And if they were to go back to opiates, they wouldn't have to deal with this volatile drug supply.
Aaron, thank you very much. And that brings us to that part of the discussion around the policy as well. Thank you so much for the call from Mission. I'll just go back to Dr. Crabtree for some final comments after hearing Aaron. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would just love to emphasize what Erin's saying about drug checking as an option for people navigating this. Drug checking sites, there's different technologies. There's FTIR, as you mentioned, there's other technologies. The first step for people who are thinking about how can I avoid methamphetamine in the drug supply is checking with the drug checking place that's nearest to them, finding out what technology they have and what supports they can offer. Also, just want to encourage people to carry naloxone, be trained if they're going to use with a buddy or at an overdose prevention site. And then again, if people are thinking about changes to their relationship to substances, reaching out to a doctor, nurse, or other healthcare professional about what supports can be offered.
Let's take one last call here in our last minute or so. Stan in Richmond, I just have about a minute, but go ahead.
I think perhaps we should try something unique that hasn't been tried. Why not legalize the drug use, the hardcore drug use, put it under medical supervision, because this is a medical problem. This is a psychiatric medical problem. Alcoholism is out there. We treat that medically. There are programs for it. There's detox programs for it. Why can we not use our medical system to help these drug addicts to get through, to stop using drugs and face the problem that we're a society. We're supposed to deal with the problems of the members of our society. No level of government, municipal, provincial, or federal, is saying that, yes, there's a big problem there. Let's deal with it logically, like we have dealt with alcoholism.
Stan, thank you very much for calling in. That's Stan in Richmond, and a much bigger conversation there, certainly, Dr. Crabtree. But I will leave it there. That conversation around dealing with this as a health issue. Appreciate your time and the information that's so important for our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Alexis Crabtree is a public health physician and medical lead for harm reduction and substance use services at the BC Centre for Disease Control. And you can continue to send your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. That is it for our show today. You can listen to us again. Just go to the CBC Listen app or watch us on demand on YouTube at CBC British Columbia.